So it's totally normal to have 7 different bodies just hanging out in a room, right? Well, since we do, I figured we'd answer one of the most common questions we get from students about the bodies in our lab. What did they die from? Now, it probably isn't shocking that most of them died from some sort of condition, or even multiple conditions, but many of them actually died from cancer. For instance, this body died of colorectal cancer, this one from breast cancer, and this one from lung cancer. What's interesting is that even though each had a different form of cancer, there was something these cancers had in common that ultimately led to their death. Today we're going to show you what this commonality was, and we'll also talk about how cancer starts, and discuss the incredible built-in mechanisms our bodies have to stop it from forming in the first place. So let's do this. Before we go back to the bodies and show you what ultimately led to their death, let's start with how cancer originates. Cancer is when abnormal cells grow out of control, and this starts when the DNA inside a cell kind of goes off script. The DNA contains genes that code for everything the cell does, including when it should divide and when it should undergo apoptosis, which is a form of controlled, programmed cell death. These are tightly regulated processes. But when mutations to certain genes occur, this orderly process gets disrupted, and cells can start to divide uncontrollably. The genes that code for normal cell growth are called Proto-Oncogenes. But when they mutate, they transform into oncogenes, which are abnormally functioning genes capable of causing cancers. Just remember, oncogene equals bad, mutated gene that could lead to cancer. Another important type of gene is the anti-oncogene, also known as a tumor suppressor gene. You can think of these as protective genes because, as the name implies, they suppress those cancer-causing oncogenes. Now here's something really interesting. You have likely had mutant cells develop in your body. So why haven't you developed cancer? Well, only a tiny fraction of cells that mutate ever lead to cancer, and there are several reasons for this. First, most mutated cells don't have what it takes to survive. They just die off. Second, even in most mutated cells that do survive, the built-in controls remain intact, like those tumor suppressor genes still working properly to stop out-of-control division. Third, we have our immune system. Picture your white blood cells as vigilant bodyguards. Most mutated cells look out of place because they express abnormal proteins. When a white blood cell spots one, it can trigger an immune response that results in the death of that mutated cell. The importance of our immune system is really highlighted when we see that people taking immunosuppressants have an increased probability of developing certain cancers by as much as 5-fold. Lastly, for cancer to form, it usually requires more than one oncogene to be activated at the same time. For example, one gene might get mutated that promotes rapid cell division, but no cancer occurs, because another mutant gene wasn't simultaneously present that coded for, say, the development of new blood vessels needed to feed the growing cancer. It usually takes multiple mutated genes existing in that cell at the same time for cancer to start. So the next question you might have is, what causes these mutated genes? Considering that trillions of new cells are formed each year, a better question might be why we don't all develop millions of mutated cancer cells. We've already discussed how our body deals with mutated cells, but even before that, our body works extremely hard to stop mutations from forming in the first place. Cells copy their DNA with incredible precision, and after it's copied, there is a proofreading process that cuts and repairs any abnormal DNA strand before the cell is allowed to divide. Yet, despite these awesome precautions, probably one newly formed cell in every few million still has significant mutant characteristics. So in some cases, chance alone is all that's required. Some cancers are just the result of bad luck. However, the probability of mutations can be significantly increased when a person is exposed to certain factors. This includes ionizing radiation like X-rays, and even ultraviolet light from the sun, which can rupture DNA strands. You've also heard of carcinogens, which are chemical substances that cause mutations. The carcinogens in cigarette smoke, for example, cause about 1/4 of all cancer deaths. Physical irritants can also lead to cancer. Repeated damage to tissues like chronic abrasions in the gut can force cells to divide rapidly for repair, and the faster the division, the greater the risk of errors. Certain viruses can lead to cancer by inserting their own genetic information into a cell's chromosomes. And of course, genetics plays a significant role. In families that are particularly predisposed to cancer, it's thought that one or more cancerous genes are already mutated in the inherited DNA, meaning fewer additional mutations are required to develop cancer. So if a cell accumulates enough mutations for cancer to start, why are these cells so dangerous? We've mentioned they grow and divide out of control, and when enough cells divide, they form a mass called a tumor. This tumor can compress and damage other structures, causing pain and loss of function. You've probably heard of tumors being benign or malignant. Benign tumors tend to be encapsulated, making it less likely for cells to break away and spread. But that doesn't mean a benign tumor can't cause problems. A benign tumor in the brain, for instance, can cause major issues because the skull doesn't allow for expansion. Even still, malignant tumors are much more serious because they are not encapsulated. This leads us to another reason why cancer cells are so dangerous. They spread. Cancer cells in malignant tumors often have additional mutations that cause them to lose their adhesion properties. They become much more likely to break away, enter the bloodstream or lymphatic system, and travel virtually anywhere in the body to start growing at a new site. This spreading is known as metastasis. Once they get to a new site, many cancers release factors that cause new blood vessels to grow into the cancer, supplying it with nutrients. This finally brings us back to the bodies here in the lab. This body didn't actually die of the colorectal cancer found in the colon and rectum. It died when those cancer cells moved to the liver, a much more vital organ. This body didn't die from breast cancer tumors in the breast tissue, but rather when those cancer cells moved into the brain. And this last body didn't just die from lung cancer, but when those cancer cells again moved to multiple sites. This is what I meant by the commonality that leads to death with most cancers. There are not many cancers that lead to death without spreading. Most cancer deaths are a result of the cancer metastasizing to a secondary site or organ that is much more vital to survival. Each one of these bodies could have potentially survived if they caught the cancer before it spread. We can remove segments of the digestive tract, perform mastectomies, and even remove segments of the lung. This is why annual physicals and following recommended cancer screening guidelines can be so beneficial. The earlier you can detect cancer, the better the chance of survival. There's one last characteristic of cancer cells I want to mention that also leads to their damaging effects, but is also a target for a certain treatment. Cancer cells are kind of the greedy little hogs of the party. They are extremely metabolically active, so they compete with healthy cells for nutrients and often win. As a result, normal cells can gradually die from a lack of nutrients. But because the cancer cells tend to hog all the nutrients, this is one of the mechanisms of how chemotherapy works. These are drugs that target fast-dividing, metabolically active cells. The idea is that the cancer cell will take up more of the drugs, leading to their death. Chemo does a pretty good job of killing cancer cells, but it also often kills other healthy cells that naturally divide quickly, like skin and hair cells and cells lining the digestive tract, which accounts for many of the side effects. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this interesting, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. We'll see you in the next one. For many of the side effects of chemotherapy. Plus, there are other toxicity issues that you have to deal with depending on the cancer and the drug. And many people who have undergone chemo can attest to how difficult this treatment strategy can be. But this is the major conundrum of cancer treatment. Even though cancer cells are different from our normal cells, they still do maintain many similarities to our normal healthy cells. So with so many different cancers and potential mutations, how do you design a drug that could target a specific cancer cell, yet completely spare one of our healthy cells? That's the billion-dollar question. And hopefully with continued research, we can figure it out. Sometimes the less exciting part of our educational experience is just memorizing information. Yes, it is important to memorize and retain information, but if you can't apply that information to real-world situations, that information isn't as useful. So having teachers or learning platforms that can help you develop application skills is invaluable. And that's why we partnered with Brilliant as the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant is an incredible way to take your learning to the next level, as Brilliant is an interactive online learning platform with thousands of lessons in math, science, data analysis, programming, and even AI. Brilliant's lessons are designed to be uniquely effective. Their first principles approach helps you build understanding from the ground up, creating a strong learning foundation that you can build upon. Each lesson is hands-on and interactive, letting you play with and explore concepts, all while helping you build those critical thinking and application skills through problem solving and not just blind memorization. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you'll also become a better thinker. And something I've been diving into a bit lately are Brilliant's lessons on geometry. I would, through junior high and high school, always being good at math, except for that blasted geometry class. I just struggled for some reason. So I'm going back to conquer my nemesis, And so far, it's actually been quite satisfying. So if you want to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit Brilliant.org or click on the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. And as always, thank you so much for watching and supporting our channel. If you feel the need, click that like and subscribe button, leave some comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.